Ellie was going to lead worship this Sunday. She was booked to fly up to New England to head up a little early, be with family, get some stuff ready for our men's trip. I've got the lobsters on my shirt in anticipation. I think Andy is starting to salivate over there. You can attest last year, I think you had, was it 2 or 3 lobsters on Friday night? I don't remember how many, but he had a good time. Well, we got a text this morning, and it said Ellie's flight was canceled, so thank you, Frontier. There's my review for Frontier Airlines. So we were going to, she said, we could have booked it in Sunday evening, but it would have cost us a bit more. And so I said, you know what, I think I'll lead worship and preach. She could have been here now, but she's still figuring that out and trying to figure out a way to get up there with Benaiah, so you can keep them in your prayers. So I am going to take off the worship leader hat, put on the preacher hat, and get into our text for today. We have been in I've enjoyed the sermon series, the sermon series Gospel Psych, looking at the realities of how God has made us, designed us as human beings with bodies, with brains that we can actually look at now. And science has seen patterns of how our brains function, and that is not a means to be discouraged or to fear what we're going to find or to hide from it, but rather we are seeing what's been revealed in these past few decades is showing what we've already been told for thousands of years, just in a different lens. And it's amazing to see the truth of God and the ways he has wired that into how we function. We talked about being bodies and spirits and how that all meshes together in a unique mystery of both being embodied people and people that are called to look at a battle that is against not flesh and blood, but against spiritual realities. We looked at shame and its power in our life, and not just its power, but the greater power of the light and living in the light and the love of Jesus Christ that has invited us to step outside of our shame. We looked at the importance of families and legacy and how God has set that up, of parents to literally bless or curse their children, and the ultimate reality of the family of God that we have been invited into as not servants, but sons and co-heirs of God with Jesus Christ. And we're going to finish up today with a fun concept called attachment. Who here has heard of attachment theory? Do we have any? Some people might have heard of it. It's kind of really grown, especially I think in a lot of education fields, a lot of working with people fields. Attachment theory, a little background. A man named John Bowlby, he was a psychologist, scientist, noticed that when children were playing in a room, parents would leave, and a lot of kids, when they would get upset, the parents would return and the kids would calm down and they'd go back to playing together. Well, but there were some that they would get really, frustrated, and they would come back and they were still just kind of really upset and despondent, really feeling like they were afraid of their parent leaving again. And there were other kids that even after their parents came back, they would just kind of be very aloof and very distant. And they did a number of research studies on this, different patterns of interaction, and they found these ideas of attachment styles. So it kind of ties into the impact of families that we talked about last week, that as parents especially interact with their children, they teach them these modes of interacting, of attaching, of being secure, knowing that they're safe. And they found that children with parents, after they experienced something that was hard or an emotion that felt, we might say, that was nothing, right? But for a kid who hasn't experienced much and he's hungry and he's like, this is it, I'm never going to get fed again, right? And we're like, well, you actually are. But they found that a parent coming and attuning, and this idea of showing up and saying, I see that you're upset and I'm here and it's going to be okay, created these attachment styles. Ideally, secure attachment, to be like, I'm secure, my needs will be met, it's safe here, I can show up. And if I'm not okay, that's okay. Well, we don't live in a perfect world, right? And there's other attachment styles. Anxious attachment style, this attachment of, I don't know if my needs are going to be met. In fact, I feel this anxiety and the fear, and I need to cling. I need to make sure, I have to make sure I'm not going to get left. I don't feel secure. I don't feel safe. And I live in this state of kind of anxiety and panic. That's an anxious attachment style. That even though we might say, well, look, like it's fine, you're going to be okay, there's just an innate pattern of how people interact and relate where their body's literally telling them that's not safe. Or avoidant. Right? Maybe you've experienced great loss, you've been left, you've been abandoned, and these kids say, well, I'm not going to get hurt that way anymore. I have to fend for myself. I'm not going to get close to people. I'm going to pull away. In fact, anytime there's an opportunity to connect and to feel secure, I don't know what to do with that because that's something that feels uncertain. I didn't have that in my life, maybe. So I'm going to avoid you. I'm going to cut off. And we see these different patterns in life. And what do we need? What do we need for a secure attachment? And so I have a little bit of an activity. We did this in the men's event last November, actually, so it's been almost a year. But they look at these core needs. What do we need as human beings, and especially developmentally, growing up as children? And so they're a little small, but we're going to build a pyramid. I don't know if you can see them. But we want to be seen, right? A baby comes into life, he's looking around, right? And he says, am I going to be seen? Is someone going to love me? We got a different battery pack. Adam Glamini, everyone. It says I'm Keith now. That's cool. All right. I'll keep talking in this until you're good. We want to be seen. We also want to be soothed, right? We want to be comforted. If you're, this is fresh in my mind right now, right? My son cries and he wants to be comforted. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Shh, 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 shh. We want to be soothed. We want to be safe. We want to know that our needs can be met. We're going to be safe to show up. And if we're not okay or if we feel scared, it's okay. I gotcha. Double duty. All right, we're good. And we want to be, ultimately, this creates a secure attachment, right? We're secure. We're secure in our families. I can show up, and I know that if I show up, it's not going to just be immediately condemnation, but, wow, okay, I see you. That sounds really hard. What do you need? How can I support you? How can I meet your needs? And when these things exist, we are able to do things, we able to have a sense of discovery. We can go out in the world, and we can feel safe, right? I can leave right here. It's going to be okay if things feel a little bit risky because I know that there's someone that's going to be there, that has my back. Right? Competence. Right? I can do this. I can learn. I think I have what it takes, and I can risk, right? I can fail. I can fall short, and that doesn't mean you blew it all. And we develop things of, wow, this is what I'm interested in. This is my passion. And as we develop more of who we are from a secure place, I get a sense of who I am, me, and who you are. And as I develop a healthy sense of that, I get a sense of we and us and how I connect with other people. It's a pretty comprehensive theory. I won't go too much more in depth with it, but it really, I invite you to think a little bit about that. It's explained things in my life of, wow, are there things in my life where before I've been like, oh, I don't know that. It ties in with a lot of the stuff we've talked about. Say shame, right? Oh, I don't know if I'm not okay, is that safe to show up? And are people, am I going to be condemned? Am I going to be understood? Are people just going to think I'm weird and write me off? And that impacts how I see myself, how I see you, and it just really does a whole number on our idea of unity, intimacy, how we connect in all spheres of life. Now I need a volunteer. Do I have any volunteers? Preferably under the age of 12. Anybody want to come up? All right, come on up, Elliot. I love the bravery. See, you are safe to come up. That's great. Now, what I want you to do is now say that Elliot here, and I don't think this because I know your parents and I know they love you a lot and they've really shown up for you and done a great job. But say that you were seen and you were soothed, but like you didn't feel safe. Like there was times where there was anger and outbursts or crazy things. You're like, this feels unsafe. So I want you to just take out that safe block. Just pull it out. Ooh. Uh-oh. You want to keep the safe box for a little bit? I leave it here. Actually, we're going to need it. We're going to need it to repair things. All right, so you still got a good sense of discovery and going out there, but look what it did to your passions. You've had no idea. How can you be safe to go figure out what you're passionate about if you're not safe, if you're too busy making sure you got to make sure you stay safe? Your idea of who you are is completely upside down, and other people, that seems to be front and center. Maybe you just really focus on other people. And to stay safe, you're making sure everyone else's needs are met. And so you is up here. We are not, like, everything's just a shambles, right? So notice how these building blocks, these things in our life happen, and what causes a lot of these things? It's a reality of sin, right, that causes these things. Sin wreaks havoc on our lives. And the enemy knows that. And how God designed us to function and secure and to be safe with one another and grow with one another gets so messed up that impacts how we see ourselves and others, and ultimately how we see God. Attachment stuff. Back together. I'll send you back together nice and whole. I didn't want you to go down when it was all in a shambles. Our attachment styles have a direct impact on who we are and how we experience the world, how we function as people, and how we interact with God. How often have you known someone, or maybe it's been in your own life, where you know what's true, and people are like, oh my gosh, can you not see? God is just so here. He has you right now. Like, maybe you know that person, and then you're like, God is so evidently at work in your life. Ellie's told me this before. She's like, you're good. God has you. These things that make me anxious or nervous. And yet, there's something where it's like, it doesn't matter. It's not connecting down here. And you're like, or you've seen someone, you're like, oh, if they could just know that God has got them. Right? And there's a part of it where we need to decide and we need to step out in faith. But some of us really have the luxury of having experienced that very well in loving homes. And other people, as the result of sin in the broken world we live in, statistics show that is becoming an increasingly rare thing. And no wonder, if we didn't know that we could feel safe with the Father, if that our father or mother saw us and said, I'm gonna comfort you when you need, well, then how on earth do we don't even know what that feels like to show up and to have that, much less from God. These things matter. And we attach to things because we need to feel safe. It's a biological need where we seek out safety. And so we attach to something for security. And this isn't all bad. Right? Spoiler alert, we saw Keith and Yvonne the other weekend. I don't know if that broke the rules, but Labor Day, we were over there, and Malia, and actually Bob and Dawn's granddaughter, Malia, they're in the process of getting the pacifier out of the picture. It doesn't go super great, right? Well, there's a comfort, right? They're used to comforting themselves, right? There is an attachment, actually, to that object that eventually has to get broken. We attach to things as a means of gaining security, of gaining identity, right? There's a healthy level of attachment of, Ellie's my wife, right? Not someone else's wife. I'm attached to her, and there's a part of who I am as a result of that, and a part of who you are as a result of the fact that she's not your wife. We have to answer. It's not a matter of if we attach to things, but what are we looking to? What are we going to meet the needs, to feel safe, to feel secure? What does this come from? Who does this come from? And if you look at Scripture reveals to us the reality of a Trinitarian God, which I love. Why is God a Trinity? Well, there's a lot of reasons, and I'm probably going to have a whole eternity to learn about why. But we see that the very nature of God is a perfect union, a perfect secure attachment of three distinct persons in one. God himself, he says, he's secure with himself. He's completely unified. He's three in one. John 10:30 says, well, it quotes Jesus. He says, I and the Father are one. In John 14:7, listen to what Jesus says about his union with the Father. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and that is enough for us. Jesus said to him, have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me. Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Do you now believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or else believe on account of the works themselves. I am in the Father is in me. This fun scientific word, attachment. What attachment style do you have? Okay, well, Jesus has known this since before creation, this secure attachment of individual beings together, so much so the three in one Trinitarian God. I am in the Father is in me. That is secure. Genesis 1:26 says, well, that God is saying, let us make man in our own image, after our likeness. Part of being made in the image of God is this relational capacity and this need to attach. Who God is himself is relational. It's in the very fiber of who God is. And being made in his image means we too are people that attach and that live relationally. It's woven into how we're designed, even neurologically. There's this idea of interpersonal neurobiology, a bunch of really long words strung together. But it's this idea that who we become is more than just ourselves. Right? We learn also from our interactions with other people. That changes and shapes us as people. A baby, right, learns who he is by the love of a gazing parent. He learns, I'm loved. He didn't teach himself that, but he learns because of other people. Other people help him know who he is, who she is. We know ourselves in large part from being seen and known by others, so much so that our narratives of ourselves can be really skewed if people have seen us incorrectly and we've had a lifetime or even short experiences where that's happened. Science recognizes this kind of thing, but again, it misses the most important ingredient, the fact that God is behind all this, and this is actually not a departure from God, a dependence apart from God, but it's actually revealing the very nature of a relational God who has made us in his image. So the question still remains, who and what are we created to attach to? We were made to partake in the divine life and connection of God. Jesus says in John 14, verse 6, I am the way, I am the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He is the way, the truth, the life. Jesus himself. We were meant to attach to this life, to partake in that life. That's his desire, the life of God. The life of God. There's not life apart from God. God is the source of life. And with that reality in mind, we can see a definition of sin from this attachment perspective. Is sin is a misplaced attachment. Our sin is we turn from God and we look elsewhere to things that are going to satisfy our needs, these legitimate needs. We want to feel safe. We want to feel secure. I want to feel loved. I want to feel okay. And there's a God that says, this is found in me, and yet what have we done for centuries and centuries and millennia? We've turned to other things. Adam and Eve, they looked elsewhere, right? They tried to become like God. They tried to do something themselves. This is at the core of idolatry. Our idols are things that we look to. And if we're honest, most of the time, the idols in our lives, it's not just, well, I want to stick it to God. But a lot of times we're going to things because we think that has something to offer. We're looking to meet a need, and it's always deceptive, and it always fails to follow through on what it promises. Take the golden calf at Sinai. In chapter 19, Moses is up on the mountain. He's getting the law. So chapter 19, he starts. Then there's a lot of stuff that talks about all sorts of different rules, different laws, different regulations, all the way to chapter 32. So I don't know how many days that was specifically, but some time. And in chapter 32, the people see that Moses is delayed to come down, and they say, we don't know what's become of him. They said, call Moses, this man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt. Right, call on him. He's delayed. Call on him. Where is he? Where's he gone? And so They don't know. They think, well, he's delayed. What's happened to him? They're away for, I don't know, it wasn't forever, but so much so that they start getting anxious and they say, okay, Aaron, make us gods. Make us gods to go before us. There was this God and we saw him work, we saw him move, and now it's been a little bit of time. And if you think about it, these are people that are so used to being enslaved, abandoned. Right? They'd called out to God for years and they were waiting. So many of these people had experienced a really hard life. And they get out and they see God, and then they're away and they don't know what's happened, and God's been with Moses, but he's not coming back. Oh my gosh, am I abandoned? Are we going to be left here? Quick, Aaron, we need gods that are going to lead us. They make an idol. Idols don't have to be golden images or statues. In Luke 14, verse 26, Jesus says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. God is not about hating others or disrespecting family. What does he mean by this? That if we look, even the good things in our life for safety ultimately and life instead of him, they're idols. They will cut us off from true life. There's a saying I like, and it's that good is often the greatest enemy to God's best for us. And it's one thing for sin in something that's, well, that's definitely bad. Stay away from that. But it's these good things that if we put them above the place of God and we're going to look to them for our ultimate life, our ultimate security, our ultimate joy, that's the definition of idolatry. Now, we might picture idols as something really evil and bad, but idols come in all shapes and forms. In fact, some of the most dangerous idols might be the good things in our life that we put above God. He's not about taking away our enjoyment in those things, but he knows that if we look to those things, ultimately it will kill us and destroy us because they aren't the source of life. It's not like a weird macho pride thing of being like, you have to look to me more than other. He needs us to do that because that's what's true. He says, I am life and I need you to have me first, because if you don't do this, it's not going to be good. You're going to die. In Matthew 19, the rich man comes to Jesus. He's done good deeds. He's kept his commandments. And Jesus says, if you would be perfect, go and sell what you possess and give to the poor. And then you will have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me. But when the young man hears this, he goes away sorrowful because he had great possessions. Here's an example of someone attached to money and possessions. He says, I've done all of these things. He says, well, then let this stuff go and follow me. And there's something. He just can't. He can't let it go. Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. You also cannot serve God and family. You cannot serve God and work. You cannot serve God and any other thing that would put itself above God. Husbands, wives, please serve each other, but do that from a place ultimately in service to God. What happens? What happens when in our sin we look to other things, we depart from God, we turn from God? We become enslaved. Enslavement is the result of this kind of attachment. In John 8, verse 34, Jesus says, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. And we see this. We see this in Romans 6. Paul talks about this, that we're slaves to what we obey. And that if we present ourselves as slaves to impurity and lawlessness, right? The more we sin, we become enslaved to these things. He talks about this. And what's the fruit? What is the result of this enslavement? The wages of sin is death. Why? Because we've removed ourselves, and when we get enslaved to sin, we cut ourselves off from the source of life. No wonder the wages of sin is death. But Paul, in that same chapter, calls us to be slaves of righteousness, slaves of God. Read here, if you are either attached to sin leading to death, or God in his righteousness leading to the free gift of God, which is eternal life. That's what he's calling us to. So if we see this enslavement, what is our heart's, oh, I'm attached to this. I need this for life. Well, let that be righteousness in God, not sin and death. When we turn to God, it mirrors this concept in attachment theory. What if you grow up and you're an anxious attachment style? You're an avoidant attachment style. Sorry, that's it? There's something called earned secure attachment. It's this idea of picking up the pieces and learning a new way of being. But to do that, we need something to come in and to help us to learn a new way. We can't do that on our own. Who are we going to look to? What's going to help us learn a new way? We need something to restore the attachment to the true place of security and life. This is where faith and the gospel of Jesus comes into play. When we allow our minds to be renewed, thus transforming us in the way we live and our ability to attach correctly and securely to what brings life. Faith is living into the discomfort and standing against these old patterns and attachments of sin and death and all the ways it's deceived us. Right? There's some people, right, they pray a prayer and they're just miraculously healed and they don't struggle with something. It seems like more often, the reality is there's this growth and there's this learning and unlearning and relearning and maybe struggling and relapsing and this battle that happens. And faith is that place that says, I believe. I believe that there is a God who loves me, a God of complete security and love and true life. And I'm not used to that. I don't even know. My body's telling me I should be anxious. I've been enslaved to sin. And in faith, I'm going to say, no, I'm going to step out and I'm going to trust that there is a God who is there to help me and to give me grace and to teach me a new way of living. I think in part that's what Philippians 2:12, when Paul says to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. It's a part of what it means, this learning a new way of living, learning how. Not just mentally and logically, but our entire being to say, oh, this is what it means to be attached to love. Throughout Scripture, God pursues and invites his people to know him. Attach to him. Know me. Come back to me. Turn your hearts to me. He's so about this that he comes himself. He sends his son, Jesus Christ, to pursue us and to invite us back. He sends Jesus not just to come on in and do what he needs to do and leave, but he lives with us for over 30 years and he models this attachment, this union, and the life that it brings. He says, I and the Father are one. I'm going to live in this way and see what happens. I speak with authority from the Father. I have life that comes from me. People encounter me and their lives are changed. It's not my authority. It's the life of the Father in me. He models it. He comes and he pursues us. And the Last Supper, this almost, if you will, this kind of final summary, the last lesson that he's going to give his disciples before his passion begins, Passion Week, and he goes to the cross. He summarizes all that he's been doing and teaching in the past 3 years, and that's where we come to John 15. And our verse of the year is right here in this passage. Starting in verse 1, he says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers. And the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. What do we see here? This is literally God's language of attachment. Abide. Abide in me. Attach to me. Look to me to be seen, soothed, safe, and secure. Be connected, so intimately connected with me. This term, in Christ, that's what it's talking about. We're so connected. We're living. The life of Christ is in us. We're attached to that. It's flowing through us. The wages of sin is death because the branch is severed from the vine, right? We see that if you don't abide in me, if you're not attached to me, you're going to wither and die. It's like pulling a plug from the ICU. In our need, in our sinful state, God pursues us. He says, apart from me, you can do nothing. And he says, but I'll take the sin. I'll take the sin that's in the way. I'll take this reality of your fallenness, of the wages of sin. I know you can't get out of it yourself. And then he invites us to live in and through him. He invites us back to the union and attachment we have always needed, that we were designed to need. And more than that, he desires that from this, our joy may be not just passable, full joy. Abide in me so that your joy may be full. Spoken to his disciples that he know many, if not most of them, almost all of them are going to be martyred for their faith. But be in me so that your joy can be full. Full joy. That's his desire. It's not just do this to get out of death. No, come, because actually life, yes, you're going to get out of death, but attach to me because this is where joy is. This is where life is. Church, the same is still true. Abide in me, Jesus says, to each one of us. That's what Paul is talking about in Romans 6. In 5 and 11, he says, if we've been united with him, with Jesus, in a death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. We know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to sin. For one who has died has been set free from sin. Now, if we have died with Christ, we believe that we will also live with him. We know that Christ, being raised from the dead, will never die again. Death no longer has dominion over him. For the death he died to sin once for all, but the life he lives to God. So you also must consider yourselves dead to sin and alive to God in Jesus Christ. Consider these attachments to sin dead and come to Jesus, alive in God in Jesus Christ. Why? Because our attachments are killing us. Do you want life? Do you want growth? And do you want fruit? Then attach to God. Abide with him. That's how we started this year. Verse of the year. It's above the entryway. If you're in the foyer coming in, it's right there. Abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. It's this reality. A reminder that we need every day when we're tempted to things to say, but I don't know, can I trust God? I don't know, I'm not feeling this life. Where do I want to go to things? Maybe I need something else. Abide in me. Abide in me, abide in me. Come to me. Know my love. Know the life that I have. How are you doing at abiding? Is the real living God your source of life? Not just theologically, but for real? Do you know him? Do you know him? Is there the source of life that comes up and you said, I really have no way to describe this except for there is a God who has promised to give joy and life, and he is living in me? Colossians 1:15-17, we're told that by Jesus all things are created. In him, in Jesus, all things hold together. He's the source of life. Is he really your source of life? We're called to a faith that is an embodied attachment to the vine. Jesus, the vine, our salvation and our source of life. This means a neurological, an emotional, and a spiritual attachment to bonding with God through Jesus Christ. How do we do this? My hope is that all of us in that question, how are you doing with attachment, from the greatest saint in the room to the greatest sinner, is I could do more. I'm hungry for more. Because there is an endless well of life and an entire eternity to get to know that more and more. There's more to know as we attach and abide and stay in the vine. How do we do this? Part of it is like a child with their parent. I can't tell you how much Benaiah has ministered to Ellie and I. What an example of abiding. It gets all of the stuff out of the way, and he just sits. And I'm like, I miss it now. I mean, it went quick. When he used to just sit on me and little peanut. I don't think we're there anymore. It does not like tummy time. But he just sits there, and it brings so much delight. God's like, abide with me. I just want to love you. And you're so busy thinking you have to do enough. You can't rest. No, surely God needs me to do something more. Spend time with him. Spend time with God. Allow yourselves to be seen by God, soothed by God, to allow yourself to be protected, to know and to feel safe, to know his security. Do we do this? That takes faith to step out when we're just like, no, let me just solve it. Let me just handle it. Well, am I giving God the opportunity and the space to teach me this way in a deeper and deeper way? Take joy and delight together in one another and in our shared experiences. But there's something in that actually teaches us and calls us to the joy of God. It's a huge reason, such a huge importance of coming together. When I can see you. I saw Jeremy this morning, and I could say, Jeremy, it's so good to see you. It was so great to have you pray for me this morning. You're loved, and you matter in my life. And now what that does is that also encourages him, and it reminds him, wow, I'm loved, and I matter, and there's delight. I'm someone I bring delight. Each of you. I haven't seen the Bears in a while. No shame in there, but I was like, it's so great when the Bears are here. I'm so glad you're here this week. People are like, don't call me out now. Mushtak's not here this week, so I couldn't do it to him. But we see each other. Take joy and delight in one another, because that points us, that teaches us about the delight that God feels for us and that he's inviting us into. Know the Spirit's presence. He promises this. He promises his Spirit to be with us. So take time to get to know it, because it's not just a fun, fancy little the Spirit. No, it's a real thing. He says, it's actually better that I leave, because if I don't go, then something better is coming, because I'm going to the Father. Better than flesh and blood, Jesus here, his Spirit. Do we take the time? Are we taking the time? Well, some of us might not even know. What does that even mean? Well, that's okay. I see you there. Because if we haven't lived in that reality or practiced that, it seems so foreign to us. So take small steps, take a couple minutes, and even just pray to God and say, God, teach me what it means to interact with your Spirit. I love Eugene Peterson. He's since passed, but he was the author of the Message translation. And I love a quote he says about imagination. And he says, Without imagination, faith's impossible. Because imagination is not just pretend fake, but imagination is the ability of us to picture and image things that are not seen physically. Imagination. I can imagine what someone's doing even though they're not here in the room right now. I can imagine other churches worshiping God, and that's real. I just don't see it. We need practice your imagination with the Spirit of God. God, if I was sitting here and you're sitting here because you actually say you're with me and I'm feeling this thing, what would you say to me? And just try it. No one is grading you. Write out, this is what he would say. If he was here, this is what I think he'd say. And then read it and be like, wow, maybe 9 times out of 10, it's actually probably, yeah, that's probably actually what God's saying to you. We have to step out and practice this way of relating and being and interacting with his Spirit. He's promised it to us. It's key. It's key of how we connect to him, how we abide in him in this life. John 15:10 says, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. And this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Loving one another, this commandment, as he has loved us. He says if we do this, we'll abide in his love. There's no greater love than to lay down one's life for his friends. That's what Jesus did. That's how he loved us. He says, do this to one another. He's called us friends. He chose us. He chose you so that you could abide and to bear fruit that fills and overflows and satisfies and blesses. Yeah. The human soul has an infinite desire. Right? We're hungry people. We want to attach to things. We want this life. I hope that as I speak, there's a hunger of yes. Like, let me say yes. The places where you say, is this all that there is? No. There is infinitely more in the person of Christ for each of us, for an eternity, to get to know. We're not going to get bored by year 100. We have this infinite desire because our souls were made to be satisfied by something that is infinitely good. And we get glimpses of that when we come together and live as the people of God and live in Christ. It's not enough to just call people away from something. Right? We don't say, don't just not sin. If we go back to that idea of a power plug, and we're trying to plug it in the water or something, okay, that's going to electrocute us. Don't do that. It's not enough to just say, take it out of the water. Don't be in the water. Don't be in the water. Don't be in the water. No. Well, you'll still have no power. Sorry. No. Put it in the power source. We hunger for that. Our world is hungry for that. In fact, they're so hungry for that they spend so much time and energy pursuing that in ways that promise life and that do not give it. But there's a source that always comes through on its promise. The martyr Dietrich Bonhoeffer has a quote where he says that the pursuit of purity is not about the suppression of lust, but about the reorientation of one's life to a larger goal. Church, it's not about suppressing and avoiding what's wrong, but reorienting ourselves and our hearts, our souls, our minds to someone greater, to the source of life. So be encouraged, be reminded this morning of the reality of that source. Attach to him, abide with him. That's his invitation. That's the call to each of us.